Hello. I think it's a little bit warm in here, so if I sit down, hope you don't mind. So the story of Postal Clerk Dorsey Trump. In 1840, John Goodnow established the first post office under the name Springfield, which was about 2 years after Goodnow's arrival. The name Springfield had already been claimed by other communities, so the post office department requested a change. And on March 3rd, 1844, our town officially became Maquoketa. The first structure was located on the corner of Main and Platte, and this is what Maquoketa downtown had looked like in the mid-1800s. And so I'm not sure, I guess, Bonnie, then if that is that same area then where eventually the post office was, where Trump worked. Is it?
I think it is.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I distracted. The building on the corner is Dave Williams Hotel.
Okay.
Can you point that out? The brick building on the corner?
This one?
No.
This one?
Yes, the brick building. Yep. It's
Okay.
set back. That's where this log cabin originally sat.
So this was the Goodnow building right there.
That was a Williams Hotel.
The hotel.
Log cabin. And then right across, the white building, right across where Mega Splash is now, that was the old stone store. It was called. So when you read history, they talk about the old stone store, that's what that was.
Okay, so this is where Make a Splash is now, but back in the day it was the old stone store.
Right.
Okay. The records kept by postal clerks show that mail had been received and delivered with Maquoketa spelled more than 1,000 ways. So I was surprised to hear that. I mean, we've all heard like a dozen different ways, but 1,000. I'd like to see that list. Our current post office was constructed around the early 1900s. And I know we do have 2 retired postal employees in the audience, for sure, that maybe might know some of this stuff that I'm talking about, and please correct me if it's not quite right. On October 20th, 1890, Dorsey Washington Trump was appointed by President Benjamin Harrison to serve as the new Maquoketa postmaster. Prior to his postmaster appointment, he had served as the postal clerk. While serving as clerk, he was removed due to his political affiliations. Imagine that.
Back then it was political. Everything was political.
A newspaper article printed the following. W.G. Thomas began work as postal clerk last Tuesday morning. Quincy Farr, deputy postmaster, went along to instruct him in his duties. Dorsey Trump, the ousted clerk, was requested by the department to run with Thomas until he was competent. Fearing that he would not live so long, he respectfully declined. He was just 41 years old when he made that statement, when he was forced out of his postal clerk position. He had a wife and 3 children whose ages were about 17, 14, and 5 to support. He was also disabled due to a disease that he had contracted during the Civil War. And he died about 7 years later. And there's a little bit of a discrepancy as far as when he was born and when he died. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Supposedly, he died in 1892. However, it was said that he was employed by the post office until 1894. There's also conflicting information, which I mentioned about the year of his birth. So on find-a-grave records tell that Dorsey Trump was born in Ohio in 1844, the son of Henry Isaac and Eleanor Shriver Trump. He was the 5th born of 6 siblings, and his parents are buried in the Andrews Cemetery. Dorsey married Mary Frances Dawson, and they were the parents of son Lyman Arthur and daughters Gertrude and Bertha. Lyman and Gertrude were born in Andrew, and Bertha was born in Maquoketa. While serving as postmaster, Trump received an excellent salary. So from August 27th to October 1st, 1890, he was paid $1,700, as shown in this published account. And you can see other, there was another one in Lynn County that received $1,700. I didn't get a chance, I guess, to look that up to see if he also was a postmaster.
Was that a year or?
That was from August 27th to October 1st. So that would be, that does seem kind of high, doesn't it? That it would be a month's wages, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Dorsey Washington Trump enlisted February 10th, 1862, Company A of the 15th Iowa Infantry in the Civil War. He was discharged on October 9th, 1862 from St. Louis, Missouri on account of disability and some belief because of the recent death of his older brother. Trump's name appears on the last line of this document, stating that he was 18 at the time of enlistment. But there may be a discrepancy on the actual year, as I mentioned before, of his actual birth. As noted on this Find a Grave website, if that account is true, he was somewhere around 13 or 14 years old when he first enlisted. And so they suggested, it said on this site, that part of the reason why he was discharged, but he was disabled, but that he was discharged because of his older brother's death. His brother, Private John Trump, had enlisted in the same company, the 15th Iowa Infantry. John enlisted September 19, 1861, and had served for a little over a year before losing his life on the battlefield. He was killed at the Battle of Corinth on October 3rd, 1862. And Kara said that the museum here, we do have a photo of John Trump, but it has not been scanned, so it would be difficult to locate this photo, but hopefully that can eventually go with the collection. The following article appeared also on this Find a Grave website. Mr. Trump is an old soldier and fought for his country's flag on many a bloody battlefield. For aught we know, this may render him odious before the administration. He served 3 years in the 15th Iowa Infantry and the 8th Iowa Cavalry, was at Shiloh and marched to the sea with Sherman, and is in declining health. Originally impaired by the hard service he saw in defense of the Stars and Stripes. Some time ago, Postmaster General Villas issued an official circular to the postal clerks informing them that none of them would be removed for their political opinions, and that all who maintain the standard of efficiency which the government requires would be retained. There are daily examples of the utter disregard of this promise. No complaint has been made of the service which Mr. Trump rendered the government, and the people of Maquoketa and Jackson County were perfectly satisfied. Mr. Lee Cole, Chief Postal Clerk for this district, addressed Mr. Trump a letter requesting that he remain a few days longer in service for the purpose of acquainting the new hire with his duties. And as I mentioned before, he said he wouldn't live long enough to be able to train that hire to where he would be competent. Trump had re-enlisted after being discharged after the death of his brother. He served as sergeant with the 8th Cavalry in Company C, having enlisted August 15, 1863. He was discharged on May 20th, 1864 on account of disability. In the time that he served in the cavalry, his company fought 3 battles in December of 1863. 1864, January, February, March, and April each saw 2 battles, and 8 battles were fought in May. By census and other records, here's the timeline of D.W. Trump's life. In 1860, Dorsey Trump and his parents and siblings were living in Kansas Territory. And in 1862, the family was living in Lyons, Iowa. And I meant to go back and look at that again because it turns out there's a Lyons, Kansas also. So it might not have been Iowa. And as mentioned, in 1862, he enlisted in the infantry, and in 1863 in the cavalry. He married sometime before 1866 and became a father in 1867. Also in 1867, he was a council member. 1868 and 1871, he served as a Jackson County recorder. By 1880, he was deputy sheriff in Jackson County, and the photo shown is not his actual badge. And 3 years later, he received a pension of $18 a month due to disease of the lungs. 1885, the census shows he was a railroad agent, which that was when he was handling the mail. And his badge may have looked something like this. In 1890, as previously mentioned, Trump was appointed postmaster. And here are some stamps from the 1890s shown. And the first one on the left is the Ben Franklin stamp, and that was 1 cent. The 2 cent stamp is next with George Washington's portrait, followed by Andrew Jackson with the 3 cent, and the 4 cent stamp, Abraham Lincoln. Dorsey Trump died at home. The cause of death, congestion of the lungs, known as scrofula, which I looked that up, and they have the spelling a little bit different, but I believe it's tuberculosis. And he is buried in Mount Hope. This 1885 article was published by the Morning Democrat. Postal clerks. The government beginning to retire them for offensive partisanship. A reply letter from one that was removed. D.W. Trump, mail agent between Davenport and Maquoketa, is in receipt of an official communication from the powers that be in Washington, informing him of his removal from service and the appointment of W.G. Thomas of Maquoketa as his successor. Affidavits were forwarded, providing him to be a good Republican and an offensive partisan in the peculiar sense in which that political phrase is interpreted by the present government. Thus, the work of practical reform goes bravely forward. Mr. Trump is an old soldier and fought for his country's flag on many a bloody battlefield. For aught we know, this may render him odious before the administration. The firing of postal clerks around the nation caused quite an uproar. Some postmasters were murdered. Appointments were made as rapidly as the Postmaster General could consider the cases. 72 appointments were made in one day. On September 30th, 1885, both the Morning Democrat and the Davenport Daily Gazette printed that the postal clerks, none of them should be removed for their political opinions and only for efficiency. Mr. Trump was not charged with inefficiency, nor could it be sustained and was removed solely on political grounds to make room for some Democratic politician's friend. Another article, postal clerks. The government beginning to retire them for offensive partisanship. A spicy letter from one that was removed. So here is Trump's response to Mr. Cole, chief political clerk for the district, who addressed Mr. Trump a letter requesting he remain a few days longer in service for the purpose of acquainting his successor with the duties that would devolve upon him. Mr. Trump declined and wrote the following response. I cannot see by what rule such claim of duty can be made upon me when we take into consideration the declarations of the Postmaster General to the effect that no efficient railway postal clerk should or would be removed on the account of his political opinions, unless he should neglect his official duties to engage in political work, and which official declaration has been deliberately and willfully violated by my removal at the instigation and command of a ring of pot-hosed politicians and gingalingers. Therefore, as I look at it, the responsibility of the proper handling of the mail rests upon Postmaster General Villas and not upon you or our honored Superintendent Captain J.E. White. And as he, Villas, has seen fit to remove me in direct violation of his solemn pledges to the railroad postal clerks, published or printed in the weekly orders, to postal clerks sometimes in italics, at the head of the orders, must and ought to convince any reasonable-minded man that there is no reliance to place upon his word, or official pledges made to the boys, but is for the sole purpose of deceiving them, and thus secure their aid in instructing new Democrats appointed from time to time until he shall see his way clear to the final removal of all those who dare to remain true to their cherished political positions and opinions. And as I have heretofore maintained mine at cannon's mouth, I certainly should not be expected to relinquish them at this late day for the sake of retaining a petty office. Although my daily bread should depend thereon, I prefer my fate rather. I would not complain or feel aggrieved at my removal if the present administration would come out squarely and honorably and say to the victor belongs the spoils. And therefore we desire the position you fill in order that we may place one of our co-laborers there within. But that not being the case, and their well-known and despicable methods have been resorted to in order to make excuse for my removal by a gang of the most desperate and unprincipled partisans in our city, and one of their number appointed to succeed me, and of whom you no doubt learn more of before you get through with him. I therefore must respectfully decline to render him any assistance whatsoever under the circumstances. D.W. Trump. Many articles throughout the country appeared concerning the injustice being handed out. Villas even appointed a postmaster who was charged with being accessory to the murder of a Republican postmaster in Mississippi. And here's where we get back to Lyons, Kansas, and that's why I'm not sure if that's where they were living before. A day or two since, we were in the office of the Secretary of the Treasury, Honorable Daniel Manning. During the conversation, we said that Democrats in all parts of the country were clamoring for heads, especially of Republican postmasters. March 8, 1885, Villas installed. Some time ago, Postmaster General Villas issued an official circular to the postal clerks informing them that none of them would be removed for their political opinions, and that all who maintain the standard of efficiency which the government requires would be retained. There are daily examples of the utter disregard of this promise. No complaint has been made of the service which Mr. Trump rendered the government, and the people of Maquoketa and Jackson County were perfectly satisfied. His removal was instigated by gutter snipe politicians and ward bummers of Maquoketa, the better element of the democracy expressing themselves as favoring his retention, or were non-committal at least, and jolting in the movement, looking to the discharge. Charges of partisanship were trumped up against him by irresponsible and unprincipled politicians. As a matter of fact, Mr. Trump held aloof from politics and exercised only those political privileges that every American citizen is entitled to exercise. He is free to admit that to the victor belongs the spoils, but objects to the deception and hypocrisy practiced by the government in promising to retain the postal clerks, and then by a dishonorable method seek to gradually weed them out. Postmaster General Villas says political questions will have nothing to do with changes in his department. The article also said that the Republican office holder that was proven to be incompetent or derelict in duty was subject to removal. Benjamin Franklin was the first American Postmaster General. And before this, research, I really haven't thought too much about the Postmaster General. And maybe many of you are more familiar with that position, but I found out that Postmaster General was one of the most powerful positions in the U.S. government. Controlling the largest civilian workforce in the country, they held immense sway over political patronage and federal infrastructure, and were eventually elevated to a formal cabinet-level role. Because the post office was the largest employer in the executive branch, the Postmaster General controlled the appointment of thousands of local postmasters across the country. They used this power to reward political allies, build local party machines, and ensure loyalty to the administration. By 1872, the General Post Office was officially designated as an executive department, making the Postmaster General a key political and personal advisor to the President. The Postmaster General had the authority to award lucrative mail delivery and transportation contracts, such as stagecoach and railway routes. By determining post roads and setting heavily subsidized rates for newspapers, the Postmaster General played a massive role in uniting the country and facilitating the spread of political news. The position began to lose its overt political power in the late 1800s with the passage of the Pendleton Civil Service Act of 1883, which required postmasters to be hired based on merit rather than political favors. The role remained in the cabinet until 1971, when the Post Office Department was reorganized into the modern, independent United States Postal Service. Currently, the Postmaster General is the Chief Executive Officer of the USPS and has immense operational power. He oversees a workforce of about 500,000 employees, manages the entire nationwide mail and package delivery network, and is in command of an annual budget that controls logistics, infrastructure, and salaries of the organization. Today, the Postmaster General is the second highest paid U.S. government official, behind only the President. Postmaster General Villas continued with his unpopular actions. Villas was considered quite a scoundrel by many, and a man who abused his position of power. Papers across the country headlined the wielding of his enormous powers on more than just the removal of postal clerks and postmasters. March 12, 1885, Postmaster General Villas administers a black eye to Vice President Hendricks. You know, in all my search about this man, I cannot find his full name. I just only have his last name. I found that odd. The Sioux City Journal wrote, General Villas is likely to have a pretty hot time of it during the coming session of Congress over his usurpation of legislative power regarding the ocean mails. It becomes more and more apparent that Postmaster General violated a plain provision of the law when he refused to pay the $400,000 appropriated to American steamship companies for transporting ocean mails. March 8, 1885. There is a pretty lively war being made on Wisconsin postmaster. It is likely that they will be pretty effectually cleaned out. If the charges set forth in a communication in the New York Sun of the 30th be true, Postmaster General Villas is liable to come unpleasantly before Congress at the next session for infraction of law and abuse of his high office. Another article stated Villas had betrayed the public's trust and was in contempt of the lawmaking power. Dorsey Trump's son, Lyman, had lived in Maquoketa, Anamosa, and Sioux City, Iowa. He was named First Lieutenant, Company M, 1st Regiment National Guard in 1894. Lyman was among the first persons in Iowa to take fingerprints for police departments. I found that very interesting, for the purpose of identification. And he was also associated with the Bureau of Identification of the Sioux City Police Department. Civil service records indicated that Mr. Trump was associated in 1918 with the Bertillon system of identification. And so that system was developed by a French criminologist, and it was the first scientific method, and he started this in 1879, but it was the first scientific method used to identify criminals. It relied on precise bodily measurements, morphological descriptions, and standardized photographs, mugshots, to catalog and track suspects. His children, which are Dorsey's granddaughters, Wynema, Castor, and Susan Carr, they donated many artifacts to the museum in the 1970s. And those included letters to Amanda Trump, and this one was on display at the back of the museum. And then also we have a letter, but I don't think it's on display, written to her father, which was Henry Trump, on the death, notifying both of them on the death of John Trump during the Civil War. And then another letter we have here that was sent to the mother, Mrs. Henry Trump, regarding her son's possessions. And then there are actually quite a few artifacts that those granddaughters donated. One says, on the accessioning papers, it says, Alex Organ's acceptance speech, R.E. sword given to A.W. Drips in return to the post by his family. And so this, let's see if I can get around here. So this is the sword, and this is normally back in the case, in the back of the room. So this was donated by the Trump granddaughters. And so we believe that to be Dorsey's sword. And then we also, I wasn't able to locate it, but we also have his census badge. He participated in the census in 1900. Also in the assessing records, it lists the bag, postal bag, that it says it was used by Lyman Trump to carry home money from the post office. I'm not sure where that is here in the museum. But it states that Lyman Trump, Dorsey's son, was the postmaster from 1890 to 1893, which I think they are referring to Dorsey. Postmaster General John Wandacker, who succeeded Postmaster General Villas, wrote this letter February 15, 1893. And I assume this letter was written to Dorsey, unless Lyman really was a postmaster too. And here are some excerpts from this letter. I desire officially to recognize the important service you have rendered as postmaster under the administration of President Harrison. Whatever has been accomplished in advance of the service has only been possible through the fidelity and zeal of those associated with the Postmaster General. In making this acknowledgement of your valuable assistance, I beg that in the future, whether in or out of office, you will continue your interest in the Postal Service and study to promote in every possible way its extension and improvement. Your friend, John Wandacker, Postmaster General. Here's the original letter received by John Trump's father on the death of his son. October 18th, 1862. I regret very much to have occasion to inform you of the death of your son, John Trump, who is a member of my company. He was killed in the late Battle of Corinth while gallantly fighting for his country. I would have written you sooner, but did not know your address until I found your letter of September 8th in regard to Dorsey W. Trump, who was sick at St. Louis. So at the time, his brother died on the battlefield. He wasn't there because he had contracted, I believe, tuberculosis. John was the only one killed in my company, but several wounded. He was a very estimable young man and a good soldier, always ready and willing to do duty when called upon. And I must say that in him I have lost one of the best men in my company. He was admired by all my officers and men, and all deeply mourn his loss, and most sympathize with his bereaved parents and friends. I will forward to Washington his account, which you will procure through services of some liable war claim agency and correspond with the War Department in relation to his account. I presume that Dorsey will be discharged at St. Louis. I cannot do it until he returns. I am, and then I can't read the word, yours with respect, J.W. Kittle, Captain, Company A, 18th Iowa Infantry. The letter that I guess I was showing you here that was written then from that same gentleman to the sister of John Trump, Amanda. And he wrote to her, you know, some different words, but they're just, it's kind of hard to read these actually. It's very, very sad. So he writes, "It is my painful duty to inform you that your most esteemed brother fell by my side. I would at once have taken him from the field, but it was against orders to carry off wounded, while we was so hard pushed. When the time came, I sought him and whistling bullets to take him back, but alas, life had fled. He was lying on his side with his head in his arms. A smile lit up his features." Corinth, Mississippi, October 14, 1862. John Trump is buried in the Corinth National Cemetery. And this sword then, I guess, since I already showed you, there's a picture of that. And again, that was donated by his granddaughters, Susan and Wynina. Dorsey Trump had the support of the community, friends and family. After he was removed from office, the Maquoketa citizens wrote a letter to the President of the United States requesting that Dorsey be appointed postmaster of Maquoketa when the position became available. To His Excellency, the President of the United States, we the undersigned, now I just have this typed version, so I don't know if we have the actual letter. Probably not, because it was sent, right? Can you make a copy of it? We, the undersigned residents of the city of Maquoketa and vicinity, who are patrons of the post office in said vicinity, beg leave to petition and request the appointment of D.W. Trump as postmaster of said office as soon as a vacancy occurs, by resignation or otherwise. And we beg leave to say, in behalf of Mr. Trump, that many of us have been personally acquainted with him since the year of 1854, since which time he has been a resident of Jackson County and a resident of the city of Maquoketa for 15 years past, that he is a good, active, working Republican and ever has been since he obtained his majority, and is at present chairman of the Republican County Central Committee and a gentleman of unblemished moral character, and fully competent to discharge the duties of said office. That he was appointed and commissioned a railroad clerk November 1st, 1881, and served faithfully as a postal clerk until October 1st, 1885, at which time he was removed upon the charge of offensive partisanship. That he was a good soldier and served his country faithfully and well during the War of the Rebellion, first enlisted in the 15th, while yet in his 17th year, in which company he served. So I really do think he was younger than what he had said when he enlisted. He served until he was disabled by disease contracted during the siege of Corinth, Mississippi. Then, after returning home, he again enlisted, July 1863, in the cavalry, which company he assisted in raising and was appointed sergeant in the company, and served faithfully until his health failed again, and he was discharged for disability at Kingston, Georgia. That ever since his health has been greatly impaired in consequence of such service. That he has been commander of A.W. Dripp's post, number 74, Department of Iowa GAR, for 2 consecutive years, and commanding general of the Eastern Iowa Vet Association, an association of ex-Union soldiers of the 2nd and portions of the 5th and 6th congressional districts of Iowa. And believing other things being equal, a Union soldier should have the preference in the appointments, and feeling confident that Mr. Trump is fully qualified by education, experience, habits, and executive ability to conduct said office in the satisfaction of the public. We therefore respectfully ask that he be appointed to said office. His friend, Thomas H. Davis, wrote him a letter of congratulations upon his appointment to the postmaster position. Dear friend Dorsey, I read the Bellevue Sunday last evening, and lo, I found what I've been anxiously waiting for. For lo, these many days, but this only goes to show that God will favor the just. I felt it all the time, and if he be for us, who can be against us? Now what must those bushwhacking wasps think of themselves? Ah, what can they say that justice and might will prevail? In the lines of the old republic, if any man attempts to pull down the American flag, shoot him on the spot. Well, my kindest regards to yourself and your lovely little family. I am so overjoyed. Hooray for Honorable S. Allison. Thomas H. Davis. Thomas Davis, I believe this is the same one that wrote that letter from all the information I could gather. He was a Medal of Honor recipient for bravery in the face of the enemy. Private Davis captured a flag of a regiment of the Confederate Army. The action took place at Sailors Creek, Virginia on April 6, 1865, while serving with the 2nd New York Heavy Artillery Company C. He received his award May 3, 1865. Thomas Davis died at the age of 81 in Maspeth, New York. And at the time that action took place, Dorsey Trump would not have been in service, but due to his affiliations with all of the veterans, I think is probably where he formed that friendship, unless they'd met earlier on in the war. That I'm not sure of. Does anyone have any questions for me? Or any comments? But if you get a chance, look at some of those artifacts back there in the Civil War exhibit. Thank you.